Exactly. And that is sort of the irony again, is that these Chiron and Gemini people also have ancient wisdom in their unconscious. But it's something that's only unlocked by acknowledging that they don't have the answer. It's when they acknowledge that they don't have the answer, they receive the answer that shows that they are truly wise. So it's the person that asks the question that becomes the wise sage. It's the one who doesn't ask the question that stays dense.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit, a podcast exploring the intersection of Western astrology and Jungian psychology. Astrology is a language that communicates how the planets and stars influence life on Earth, while psychology helps us navigate both conscious and unconscious experiences. Together, these tools offer the potential for self-understanding, growth, and transformation. Join astrologer Scott Tajarian and me, psychotherapist Gabriella Durso, as we dive into the cosmic forecast each week.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit. This is the week of June 3rd through the 9th. Hi, Gabriella.
Hey, Scott.
So we're going to jump right into it because there's a lot of transits this week, a lot of moving, a lot of shifting. But just to give a highlight overview, Mercury is going to transit from Taurus to Gemini. Mars is transiting from Aries to Taurus. And we also have the new moon in Gemini, which is conjunct with Venus. So a lot to cover this week. But before we do, I want to test out this new idea that I have. And I'm curious to hear back from our listeners to know if this is helpful to you. I want to highlight where the sun is going to be and where Mars is going to be transiting and who that may be affecting most adversely. So the sun is transiting from 13 to 19 degrees in Gemini, which means that if you were born between 1963 and 1967, the sun is going to be squaring your Pluto this week, which could mean that you're going through difficult, powerful transformation. This is an annual occurrence, so really think back to the entirety of your life. What has gone on between June 3rd and June 9th if you were born between 1963 and 1967? Is this typically a more challenging time of the year for you? This is also for those who were born between 2001 and 2004, though I'm not sure how many listeners we have that are that young, but maybe you're somebody who has a child who was born between 01 and 04. Those that were born between 01 and 04 were born with Pluto in Sagittarius, which is opposing where the sun is going to be this week. So when the sun opposes Pluto or squares Pluto, it can be a challenging sort of transformation to yourself. You know, we're constantly growing and evolving. And this is that time of year for those that were born between 1963 and 1967 and 01 and 04 that there could be conflicts and challenges coming up that are urging you to transform in some way.
So bringing an awareness of the birth, death cycle.
Exactly.
In some way.
Exactly, yes. And so there's one other transit that I want you to be aware of. If you were born between 1981 and 84, if you were born between 81 and 84, then Mars, which is transiting from 25 degrees Aries to 0 degrees Taurus, is opposing your Pluto. So if you were born between 81 and 84, the god of war, Mars, is opposing your god of death, Pluto. So this is maybe even more intense than when Pluto is opposing your sun, or squaring your sun is when Pluto is opposing your Mars. Again, conflicts, challenges coming up potentially that are urging you to transform in some way. What does that mean to you? How does that feel to you? Please let us know.
So it sounds like you're suggesting that these could be either internal conflicts or external, or both.
Yes.
Ultimately.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that's an important piece to pay attention to.
Totally. I mean, maybe it's an internal conflict, maybe it's an external conflict. It all sort of depends on where this is happening in your astrological code. Like, what house is the sun transiting through right now? What house is Mars transiting through? Are there other planets in your astrological code that Mars or the sun are aligning with? That's going to play into whether or not the challenge is external, or the conflict is external, or it's internal. So as always, if you're curious to know more about how these or any other transits are affecting you directly, I encourage you to contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com.
Ultimately, it's probably a combination of both, right?
Totally,
the internal,
right? Yeah.
The external. Hard to have one without the other.
Exactly, right? Like, if it's the external conflict, then it's probably trying to wake up something within you internally. Or if it's an internal conflict, then it's trying to awaken you to something that's happening externally.
Right.
Yeah, that's how I think of it.
And conflicts as well can be conscious, meaning that we're aware that we have a frustration about a particular topic or relationship, or conflicts can also be unconscious.
Yes. Totally.
When we're not really sure why something aggravates us or irritates us, or if you're someone who has a tendency to think that all of your conflict is external, then that could be an indication that for you, the conflict internally has been suppressed, and that there could be some deeper work to look at kind of what that might be about.
Yes. Can you talk a little more about that and maybe give some examples of what that might be?
Sure. Well, one way to explore where you might have unconscious conflict could be to look at your dream life and where you have conflicts in your dreams. And as we've shared before on this podcast, there are different ways to interpret dreams, but one way to interpret dreams is that every part of the dream experience is reflecting a part of you. So if you experience conflict in a dream, and that's representing an internal conflict within yourself.
Right. So if you're experiencing a conflict within your dream, then that represents an internal conflict that you have within yourself. Right.
That you're unconscious of.
You're unconscious of. Right. Yes. And that can maybe alert you to something that's going on in your external life that you need to become aware of, consciously aware of. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
I had a significant dream several years ago where I was being chased by a snake. And then at one point I started chasing the snake.
Okay.
And that would be an example, whether it's human, animal, inanimate object, whatever the conflict is for you. What does that represent? So, for example, this is not a situation that would happen in waking life, typically, right? But for me, it was a signal that my transformative nature, right? Snakes actually represent transformation. If you think about
shedding the skin,
the experience of them shedding their skin. So the conflict that I was having in this dream was a conflict between the part of me that wanted to transform and the part of me that didn't. Hence the chasing.
Right.
There was something that I wasn't allowing myself to learn about what was needing to be transformed.
And so all in one dream, the snake was chasing you, and then you turned around and started chasing the snake? Or was that like a reoccurring sort of dream and then it switched?
It actually switched in the same dream.
In the same dream.
And of course, there's much more to the dream, but
Uh-huh.
that's just the example that really highlighted the conflict piece. So I think it's important to really work with dreams symbolically, recognizing that they're not always going to show us exactly what the conflict is in waking life, but it's going to give us some other part of the story that we might be missing.
Okay. Right.
So there are all kinds of reasons why we might resist transformation. And one of those could be, one primary reason could be, what do we have to face after that part of us that's ready to die? What is it that we have to face right after that? We have to face the void. We have to face the period where there is emptiness before what is coming in, before what is ready to be born has been born. So typically when we have a fear of transformation, it's not necessarily fearing the letting go of the thing itself, but it's kind of
The
what
emptiness.
comes, it's the emptiness that comes after it that can be
The not knowing of what's next.
the not knowing of what's next. Really, that it's an incredibly fertile period, but there is emptiness. It's the void.
Yes. So I would just say, if you were born between 1963 and 67, 81 and 84, and 01 and 04, then you're in that period of the death and facing the void. What comes up, and what are you wanting to create from that void of the ending into a new beginning? Yes. So looking at the week, I'm going to break this week down into Mercury, the Sun and Venus, and then Mars. So these four quicker moving planets, the personal planets, Mercury, the Sun, Venus, and Mars, they're aligning with several outer planets. The Sun and Venus are together, so they're kind of a tandem. And we're going to layer this all in to give an overarching highlight of the week and how to work with the energy. So we begin the week with Mercury transiting into Gemini. Mercury is the messenger of the gods, guide of souls to the underworld, the planet of consciousness, communication, and coordination, the god of merchants and thieves. Transiting into the mutable air sign symbolized by the twins and ruled by Mercury, Gemini. So Mercury transiting into the sign where it is in a position of power, because it's in the sign that it rules. Mercury is the planet of communication. Gemini is the sign of communication. Mercury is transiting through Gemini from June 3rd to the 17th. So it's just a quick 2-week period, really, of Mercury transiting through Gemini. So things are going to be moving very quickly in terms of the mind, your conscious awareness, sharing what you are thinking, receiving the thoughts of others. This is a great time to connect with others, to ask questions, to gather information, to learn a little bit about a lot, and really hone in on your listening skills. Because in order to be a great communicator, you need to be a great listener. And that is the gift of Mercury in Gemini. It really incites a optimistic sense of curiosity, of wanting to learn. I don't know. Tell me, what else do you have to share? It's like there is this sort of lightness to Mercury in Gemini. So hopefully the vibe is elevating. Of course, though, if you were born with key points or planets in Virgo or Pisces, this could be a challenging period for you because Virgo is mutable earth, Pisces is mutable water, Gemini is mutable air. They're all mutable. So they make a strong aspect to one another, but air, which is Gemini, doesn't mix with earth, Virgo, or Pisces, water. So there's tension. The Virgo energy really wants to get into the details of things. And Pisces wants to see the depth of everything. And Gemini is like, no, let's just move on to the next thing. Okay, let's keep it light. Let's keep it moving. I'll talk to this and I'll talk. Wait, what's that? Oh, okay. It's all over the place. It can be a little much for the Virgo Pisces energy. But if you were born with key astrological points or planets in air or fire signs, this is a really powerful time to thrive in the area of communication. The thing is we were all born with key points or planets in air or fire signs. Even if you were born with the sun in Virgo or Pisces, or the moon in Virgo or Pisces, you probably have key points or planets that are in air and fire. So this is why the degrees are so important, so that you can be mindful of when Mercury is aligning with your planets in Virgo, your planets in Pisces, or your planets in air and fire. That will really help you work with the energy and know which days are going to be perhaps more challenging and which days are going to feel more empowering.
It's important to remember, too, that if communication in general is maybe more difficult for you or more stressful, that maybe an invitation here is to think about, like I just mentioned, this internal, external piece. I think with communication, that's really important. Before we're able to communicate externally or to even ask questions, there's an internal process that has to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it starts with your communication with yourself and how connected and conscious you are with what's going on within your whole system.
Right.
Otherwise, what you're communicating out into the world is not meaningful because it's not connected to your inner life, your inner world.
Right. That's so interesting.
Well, think about it developmentally.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about this before, but babies don't ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there yet.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They're developing their inner world. When you get to that stage where the child starts asking questions, usually incessantly, right?
Yeah.
There's
What's
like
that?
this.
What's that?
Yeah. There's this developmental stage where you realize that there are things that you don't know. But in order to get to that point, you have to develop enough consciousness about what you do or don't know. Right? So I think even as adults, we have to be mindful of how conscious we are. And of course, there are always things we're unconscious of, right? So how conscious are you of what you don't know in order to ask the question? Because essentially when you're asking a question, you're recognizing that going back to the void, that there is some sort of void of knowledge of something within yourself that you're looking to fill.
Right.
So part of why this curious kind of communication energy, if that's stressful for you, maybe that's an indication to look within, and maybe it's a process of asking yourself questions before you're ready to ask them to others. So it could be a whole internal process here around just getting curious about your own inner life that could be really fruitful if it's not showing up for you socially.
Well, and that's what the planets have sort of been guiding us towards to begin with, because there are still Chiron and Mars, though Mars is moving into Taurus this week, and the North Node in Aries. And then there's Uranus in Taurus, which is where the planets Venus and the Sun and now Mercury and Jupiter have all just transited from. So we've had this extended period of understanding who am I, which is the Aries energy, the Taurus energy, which is what do I like? Once you know who you are and what you like, now you have the conscious wherewithal to be able to have a conversation with somebody else to find out what they like and how that reflects upon what you like.
You know enough about yourself to be
Yes.
able to take in
New
information from the outside world.
Exactly. Yes. And so that is where the planets are right now. We've sort of graduated to this next level of knowing who we are, what we value, and what we can learn from others now, which is the Gemini piece. The last time Mercury was transiting through Gemini was June 11th to the 26th, 2023. The time before that was June 13th to July 4th, 2022. And then just before that, April 29th to May 22nd, 2022, was when Mercury was transiting through the first 4 degrees of Gemini, and then it retrograded back into Taurus, and then forward into Gemini again. That was kind of a concentrated period of the first 4 degrees of Gemini, April 29th to May 22nd, 2022. But then the full time of Mercury through all 30 degrees of Gemini was June 13th to July 4th, 2022, and June 11th to the 26th, 2023. So think back to those dates for clues on what could be in store for you this time around, because the energy is in a similar place in terms of Mercury. Now, Mercury is moving very quickly, so it's making several alignments with various key points or planets during this week. The first begins with Pluto, the god of death, lord of the underworld, the planet of transformation, transiting retrograde through the fixed air sign symbolized by the water bearer Aquarius. This is from Monday, June 3rd to Wednesday, June 5th, with an exact sextile happening on Tuesday, June 4th. So this transit is creating an opening for that conversation within the group, the club, the social network, the social cause, your community, your society. This is creating an opening for you to facilitate the conversation within the group, to ask questions, to gather people together. Maybe you're the one that's initiating, hey, let's all get together and have a conversation. And you're asking this person a question, which is leading to that person asking another question, and so on and so forth. And let's get the conversation flowing. What would you like to change about the way that you communicate within your community, or the way that the community communicates with each other?
That feels like a really potent question right now.
Yeah, of course. But that's why it's up right now, because now is a good time to have these conversations. It's, I think of Sagittarius as being the know-it-all sign. It's the sage, the priest. It's the professor. It has all the answers because it's traveled here and there and it's read all the books. Sagittarius is opposite Gemini. So we need to pull ourselves out of that know-it-all energy and move into that curiosity energy that I don't know. I really don't have the answer. I'm curious. I have a lot of questions. So I want to ask this person why they believe whatever they say they believe. And I want to ask that person why they think this is the truth or that's the truth. And when they give me the answer, I'm probably going to have 4 or 5 more questions before I get to a point where maybe I feel satisfied by what they've shared with me.
I think you're highlighting some interesting points. One being that sometimes asking questions just leads to more questions, which is ideal.
Yes.
Especially like if you're doing dream work, you might end up with more questions than answers, and that can be a really fruitful place to be. But also, what you said just sparked something in me that I know we've talked about before, but this idea of the energy behind the question. Like if you're asking questions from that Sagittarius know-it-all place, then you're not really receptive.
Exactly.
You're not really in the place of being able to receive.
Exactly.
So there's a real difference in how you're
Yes.
asking the question and
Totally.
the intention behind the question that really is going to impact the way that you're able to receive that answer, if you are at all. And it's really going to impact the experience of the person that you're communicating with. I'm sure we've all had experiences where someone asks us a question and you know what they want you to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not actually really wanting the answer. They think they know what the answer is already. And it changes the conversation.
That's why you need to ask the question from that genuine place of curiosity and not from a condescending tone that is asking a question to lead, where your question is actually making a statement.
Right.
You don't want your question to make a statement. You want your question to really come from that place of curiosity, genuine curiosity that I don't know. And I would like you to share with me what you know. These same 3 days, June 3rd through the 5th, Monday through Wednesday, is when Mercury is going to form a conjunction with Jupiter, the god of thunder, lord of justice, the planet of luck and expansion, also transiting through Gemini. So while Mercury is aligning with Pluto, it's also forming a conjunction with Jupiter, with the exact conjunction happening on Tuesday, June 4th. So it's interesting because Jupiter is the planetary ruler of Sagittarius. So it almost sort of begs this condescending question that's a statement with Jupiter conjunct Mercury. Maybe there is some of a threat of that happening where the questions become verbose and boastful or self-aggrandizing in some way, where it's like you're asking the question because you think you're the smartest person in the room and you're asking a question of somebody that is making them feel small or like they don't know. There is the threat of that happening early this week with Mercury conjunct Jupiter, but the alignment with Pluto and Aquarius is bringing that to the surface within the group, within the community. There might be opportunities for you, if you hear somebody asking a question in a way that's condescending, asking them, can you explain to me the root of the question that you just asked? What are you hoping to learn by asking that question?
What I hear from that when someone's asking a question from that place of, I know better than you, my answer is the right answer, is it's just an orientation towards the ego that's not benefiting.
But are you making an assumption about that? Because you're saying, you're giving a reason as to why that person is asking the question in the way that they are, which would say that they're asking it because there's something up with their ego.
Well, the ego itself is not problematic. So
Okay.
the ego helps us understand that we're different from other people, that we have different ideas, we have different thoughts, feelings, belief systems. That's all great.
Right.
The ego can become problematic when we think that, when we try to create a hierarchy within those differences. So it's one thing to be able to say, I have a different opinion about this than you. That's a healthy relationship with the ego. Equal but different. When the ego becomes problematic is when you start to think that your way is better than mine or my way is better than yours.
But are you saying that somebody who asks a question that is condescending, there's something problematic with their ego?
It could be. It could be that they're coming into the question from a place of grandiosity, believing that they already know the better answer.
Right.
And that's not really an environment where you can learn, where you're open and receptive to learning.
So what would be a good way to pose a question to somebody who's asking a condescending question?
I don't know if you can. I don't know if that's an environment that's going to be able to foster this Gemini energy. I think maybe the most thoughtful thing you could do for that person is just let them know that you notice that they're asking a question from a place that's actually not very open and that it's not encouraging you to really want to participate in the conversation. Maybe just bringing some consciousness to it. Like, hey, I hear that you're asking me this question, but your tone or your body language or the inflection of how you're asking me the question actually indicates that you're actually not receptive to my answer. And so my experience in this conversation is that I don't really want to participate in it because I don't think that you're actually curious about what I have to say.
But then if you're doing that, aren't you making a statement?
Yeah, you are making a statement.
So what would be, again, I think it's important to ask, like, what would be a way to diffuse that by asking a question of the person that is being condescending within their question? You're saying that there's nothing to ask.
Well, wouldn't that Gemini energy just move on to a place where there is curiosity?
Maybe they would.
But you're wondering if there's a way to kind of transform that energy with a question.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, obviously, I think the appropriate thing to do would be to answer the question that the person's asking, and to answer it in a way that is not threatened by the question to begin with. I think if you're threatened by the question that somebody asks, then you're almost falling into the trap that they may have set for you. So even if you're taking a question as being condescending, to answer it in good faith, and then to maybe retort with another question following your answer to learn more about where their question is coming from.
I guess that's up to the individual to decide how much they're willing to engage with that kind of energy. You know, you're going to be more likely, if that's your partner or a member of your family, to probably do that. If it's someone in the line at the grocery store, you might just decide to walk away.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends on the circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mercury closes out the week with a third alignment. By the end of the week, by June 8th, Saturday, continuing to next Monday, June 10th, with an exact alignment happening on Sunday, June 9th. Mercury is forming a sextile with the North Node, which is the karmic pathway of the soul, or soul's purpose, transiting through the cardinal fire sign symbolized by the ram, Aries. In the beginning of the week, there's a lot of questions flying around, and we're transforming the way that we're communicating. By the end of the week, maybe we have a little more self-confidence to find the question that needs to be asked. With Mercury aligning with the North Node in Aries, there has to be each one of us has a burning question. And hopefully by the end of this week, that question has become clear within you, and you have the courage to ask it. That's what I feel like this final transit of Mercury for the week is doing. It's really, we've had that conscious awareness in the early part of the week, and by the end of the week, we have the courage to ask the question that we've been wanting to ask. We know the question, and now we are willing to ask it.
Can you speak to what this time period might be like for someone who has Chiron in Gemini? So that if their wound is in Gemini,
yes,
how could this time be for them, or what might they be needing to look at?
Asking for a friend.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. It's funny too, because a lot of people, I just think about like the people that were born in 1986, 87, were born with Chiron in Gemini, but also the North Node in Aries. And so I feel like Gemini and Aries, they have this close connection to each other. They're 60 degrees apart. They're separated by one sign, Taurus. And so they have this sort of working relationship. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier. In order to ask the question, you need to have an understanding of self and who you are and where you are, and I don't even know what a thought is. How can I have a question if I don't know what's even going on in my mind? I think if you were born with Chiron in Gemini, then these aspects with Mercury in Gemini aligning with the North Node in Aries are helping you come to terms with yourself and who you are. And through understanding who you are, you will hopefully have the courage to ask questions that you maybe had never even thought of before.
So is Chiron in Gemini essentially a wound with asking questions, or a wound with kind of admitting what you don't know?
Yes.
Ultimately?
Yes. I feel like I find with people that were born with Chiron in Gemini, like they have a fear around not knowing. As if they should know all that there is to know, which who does? Who knows everything that there is to know? I don't care who's up on the stage at the TED Talk. That person doesn't know everything there is to know. There's not a professor, a priest, or anyone in the world that knows everything there is to know. There is always more to learn. And those that were born with Chiron and Gemini, they have a wound to their conscious mind. There's a fear maybe around thinking that they're not smart. And so if I'm the one that raises my hand, then everyone's going to know that they don't know the answer to that question. Oh my God, they're so dumb.
Well, and the irony is that you have to admit that you don't know in order to learn.
Yes.
Which is
exactly.
the ultimate paradox.
Yes.
If you don't raise your hand in class,
then you don't learn.
Then you're not going to learn.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy at some point.
Exactly. And that is sort of the irony again, is that these Chiron and Gemini people also have ancient wisdom in their unconscious. But it's something that's only unlocked by acknowledging that they don't have the answer. It's when they acknowledge that they don't have the answer, they receive the answer that shows that they are truly wise. So it's the person that asks the question that becomes the wise sage. It's the one who doesn't ask the question that stays dense. Asking the question is what begets wisdom. So I encourage your friend and all the other Chiron and Gemini people out there to don't be afraid to ask questions. I mean, use me as an example here. Like, I don't know what I am talking about most of the time.
That's not true.
I think I have an idea of what I know, but I also know that I don't know everything. I'm constantly learning. Like when I got into astrology, I was in my 40s. These Chiron and Gemini people are not even in their 40s yet, a lot of them. So I didn't know hardly anything compared to what I know now in terms of astrology in my early 40s. Now I'm in my late 40s and I know so much more. How did that happen? By asking questions, gathering information. That's how I received the knowledge, not by pretending that I knew something that I didn't know.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Questions are good. We need to be asking more questions. Very important, especially right now with Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and Jupiter, 4 planets transiting through Gemini. Connect to people and learn from them. And you know what's going to happen is they're going to want to learn from you too. And then you will feel like, wow, I'm so smart. They learned something from me. But you learned something from them too.
Beautiful.
Yes. Moving on to the next section of the week, where we're going to highlight the Sun, the giver of light, life, and vitality, and Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, Lady Luck, the planet of relationships. Both the Sun and Venus are transiting together, side by side, conjunct. This is the Venus Cazimi, which...
What does that mean? In the spirit of questions.
Yes, good. I'm glad you asked that. Because I was just going to say, we got a question from Bamboo22. What's a Cazimi? And so...
How do you spell Cazimi?
That's a good question too, because it's spelled different ways.
Oh, okay.
And so,
that's confusing.
And in the spirit of asking questions, I asked ChatGPT. Like I know what a Cazimi is to a degree, but I'm like, I really want to understand, because you hear a lot of astrologers say like, oh, it's, a Jupiter Cazimi or a Venus Cazimi, and they sound so smart when they're
Never
saying
heard this
that.
term
Yes,
before.
The Cazimi.
I don't think you've ever used this term before.
Because I don't feel comfortable using a word that I don't really know.
Huh.
And I hear a lot of people using that word, and so I had to do some research and discover what it meant. But it's one of those words in astrology that makes you sound like you're smarter than everyone else, because no one else knows what this word means. So I did a ChatGPT question. According to ChatGPT, in astrology, the term Cazimi, spelled Cazimi, refers to a condition where a planet is in very close conjunction with the Sun, typically within 17 minutes, less than 1 degree of an arc.
So it's closer than a conjunction?
Well, what they're saying is, so it is a conjunction. It's not closer than a conjunction, but they're saying that when it's within 17 minutes, so it's it's less than a degree. Like a conjunction, I think of two planets being conjunct, they're within 2-3 degrees from one another. But they're saying that the cazimi is when it's within, like it's the same degree.
So it's closer than a conjunction. Is that right?
I don't know if I would describe it as closer than a conjunction.
Because a conjunction, you just said, is between 2 and 3 degrees.
Right. So it is a conjunction.
This is closer. Right?
I guess so. Sure. It's closer than a conjunction.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Well, I just like when you look at a chart, right? It shows the degrees, and then there's a second set of numbers next to the degree.
The feet, right?
That's the minutes.
The minutes, okay.
Yeah, the minutes. So I always used to say feet too. So, and a client like called me out about it. She's like, you always say feet and you're so smart, but you don't sound smart when you're saying feet. It's actually minutes. And I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that, but I don't know. I always say feet because I see the two lines.
The little markers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I sounded and looked like an idiot, after I've been doing hundreds of readings or whatever, because I'm always saying feet. So I'm going to call myself out. It's minutes. Those extra two numbers.
Okay.
And what it means is this proximity is the planet is in the heart of the sun. The planet that's having the cazimi. A position believed to endow the planet with a significant boost of strength and positive qualities. Instead of being overwhelmed by the sun's rays, as most planets are when too close to the sun, a condition called combustion, a cazimi planet is thought to be empowered and protected by the sun's intense energy. The origin of the word cazimi comes from the medieval Latin phrase in corde solis, meaning in the heart of the sun. The term was later Arabized, and the medieval astrological texts, it appears in various forms such as Kazimi with a K, Kizimimi, or similar spellings reflecting the influence of Arabic on the astrological traditions of the time. The concept and the term have been carried through to contemporary astrology, where cazimi continues to denote a special potent condition of a planet. Is that a thorough answer?
Well, I have more questions.
Go for it. Ask. Yeah. Yeah.
So, can any planet benefit from being close to the sun? It kind of makes it sound like only some of them do. Some do and some don't. So I'm wondering.
No.
Why?
I think it's saying that they all do.
No, it says most planets, when they're too close to the sun, experience combustion, which is when they're overwhelmed. But some planets don't. They have this special relationship of being in the heart of the sun, but it doesn't explain why some planets do and why some don't.
So the combustion happens when a planet is within 8 degrees of the sun, but not within the 17-minute cazimi orb. So it's like in the combustion, and then it goes to the cazimi, and then the combustion.
So there's a zone where it's beneficial, and then you can still get too close.
I guess so. Not too close, but no, it's like the combustion is outside. The closest area is the cazimi, and the outside area is the combustion. So it's like it's burning it up, and then it's empowering it, and then it's burning it up again. So it's like a death and a rebirth. That's how I see it.
Interesting.
That's what my intuition is telling me. This combustion of the sun and Venus has been occurring for some time. They have been within a degree or two of each other since May 26th. And they're going to continue to be within a degree or two of each other until June 9th. But this Cazimi is happening on Tuesday, June 4th.
And what do you imagine that might bring us?
It's going to bring up a lot of questions in relationships. And this is also happening in alignment with the North Node in Aries. So Monday, June 3rd, from June 2nd to June 5th, this conjunction between the Sun and Venus is aligning with the North Node in Aries, and they form an exact sextile to the North Node on Monday, June 3rd. So it's interesting to think about how all this is happening sort of at once, because that the beginning of the week we've got these alignments with Mercury and Jupiter and Pluto, while the Sun and Venus are aligning with the North Node in Aries. It really feels like we are being given the courage to ask all the questions that we want to ask from those that we're in relationship with. I can't encourage our listeners enough to get out there and to be in conversation with others during this period. It's important, I feel like, and going to be supportive of you on your journey to be out and about and having conversations with others, to listen, to learn, to ask questions, and connect. Even if it's just with one other person, but hopefully with more than one. I find that people that were born with the Sun conjunct Venus are charming and beautiful, because the Sun is bringing that vital light to the planet of the senses. Now, this being in Gemini invigorates curiosity. Venus is the planet of the senses. So this is such a great time to really share what you value with others and to receive what they value with you. By the time we get to Thursday, that brings us to the new moon in Gemini, which is aligning with Venus. So we've got Venus, the Sun, and the Moon all together at the same degree for the new moon in Gemini, which is Thursday, June 6th at 5:38 a.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time. The moon passes Venus about an hour later at 6:37 a.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time on Thursday, June 6th. Of course, if you are curious to know how this new moon and then the following full moon, which will be in Capricorn, is affecting you directly, I encourage you to enroll in my moon cycle classes at theweeklytransit.com, where we're going to look at where this is happening in your astrological code and which planets in your astrological code are going to be directly connected to the Sun, the Moon, and Venus, which is all a part of this. So there's a lot coming up here in terms of relationships. The overarching question is, what do you want to learn from your relationships? What do you want to learn from the ones that you love? What would you like them to learn about you? Who would you like to connect with? Who are you curious to get to know more? This is about setting your intentions to ask questions from those that you're in relationship with, whether it be a lover, a friend, or a business partner. Set your intentions to listen. Set your intentions to learn. Set your intentions to connect with others and to connect others to each other. Like, you know what? I really think this person should meet that person. Set your intentions to connect people together. That's what this new moon is about.
And then what do you do with what you learn?
That's a great question.
Because I'm just imagining you're going out. It's almost like you're foraging for knowledge, and then you're coming back with all this information, and where do you, like, how do you synthesize that? Where is that going?
So here's a simple
Is
example.
it going into your new moon intentions, or is maybe something you learned, then you have to like integrate it and it goes somewhere else?
Gemini's all about connecting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like I mentioned a few weeks ago how I went back to Santa Barbara and gave a speech at my fraternity dinner, and I connected with a fraternity brother who I didn't know because he was younger than me. And so were in the fraternity in college at different times. But we connected over the phone after the dinner. I reached out to him and we had a nice conversation, and he was asking me about what I do as an astrologer. And he was asking me the type of clients or people that I'm looking to engage with. What is he going to do with that information? What he's going to do is, he said, when he comes across people in his life that he feels would be a good match, through talking to them, asking them questions, listening to them, learning from them. Oh, you should connect with my friend Scott. So that's what you do with the information that you learn from another person. You learn from them, you file that away in your mind, and then you talk to another person and you ask them questions and you recognize that, oh, this person should connect to that person, because remember when I was asking this person certain questions and they gave me some answers, that this is what this person is actually looking for. So it's all about connecting. What you're doing with the information is utilizing it to figure out who you can connect in your life. Your Gemini, I think of Gemini as being like the conduit. That this piece only fits with this piece if we have this other piece in the center, which is you. They can't connect together unless you are there, because this person doesn't know this person, but they both know you. And if you recognize that this person should meet that person, they could help each other in some way, you're the conduit. That's what the Gemini energy is. And so you're setting your intentions to be a conduit, because when you're a conduit for others, they can be a conduit for you. And they can connect you to other people. And then we have this grid of knowledge that just spreads out infinitely, where we're all connecting our minds together and learning from one another.
So ultimately, you're just holding the knowledge, filing it away until you need it for the future.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think about Gemini as it's the sign that's known for holding vast amounts of useless information. Like my dad was a Gemini, a Mercury in Gemini. And I remember one time he was working out in the yard, and he asked one of my sister's friends, this young girl, do you know what this is here? And it's
what a plant was?
No, it was like this metal rod that was connecting down from like a telephone pole or something like that. And she could care less what this is.
She's like, of course not.
Yeah, exactly. But he's like, it's called a guy wire. Now, why does my dad know this? A guy wire? But my sister and her friends would always laugh about that. That like, what's that? Oh, it's a guy wire. Because it's just like this seemingly useless information, but you never know when you might need it. So it might seem like it's useless, but at some point in time, it might become valuable to you.
It's going to be the puzzle piece.
Yes, exactly. And that's what Gemini is. You might think, and Gemini is about learning a little bit about a lot. That's why Geminis are so smart. Gemini is the intellectual, but also the airhead. They come across as being ditzy because they're so glib and fun, like Marilyn Monroe, Gemini. Ditzy, the airhead, but so smart as well. Very intellectual. That's the twins. On one side, there's the airhead. On the other side, it's the intellectual. And they have the ability to hold vast amounts of information where they can really have a conversation with anyone at, say, a cocktail party and hold their own. They're not going to have all the knowledge, but they know enough to have an intellectual conversation with anyone about anything. And that's what this energy is helping us to be. More like that. I know a little bit about that. I can have a conversation about that. And so the final transit of the week, and there's sort of two of them, because as we get to the end of the week, Venus begins to move past the sun. It moves past the sun. And so they start to split up a little bit after this Cazimi. It becomes a combustion. And they both align with Saturn, the god of wealth and time, the planet of restriction, responsibility, hard work, achievement, and authority, in the mutable water sign symbolized by the fish and representing Gabriella's favorite topic, the unconscious. So Venus aligns with Saturn June 7th to the 9th, Friday to Sunday, with an exact square occurring on Saturday, June 8th. The Sun is right after that. The Sun squares Saturn from June 8th, Saturday, to Monday, June 10th, with an exact square happening on Sunday, June 9th. All these conversations flying around through the week, and then the square happens at the end of the week, which is sort of putting our mind into a vice, our head into a vice, and it's like, oh wow, I've learned all this information, and things are coming up from my unconscious now to my conscious reality, and I don't know what to make of this. Now I'm confused. Now I'm maybe frustrated. I want to kind of put the genie back in the bottle. I want to be ignorant again because I've learned some information that is splitting my mind in some way. What could that be for you? What are you learning that is challenging your unconscious?
Well, this is kind of part of what I've been feeling this whole episode, is that sometimes you don't ask a question because you'd rather not know.
Ignorance is bliss, right?
Ignorance, in my experience, really can be quite blissful. It can be lovely. But yeah, once you know, you can't unknow.
You can't unknow it, yes.
I was talking about this recently with someone who might be curious about having a psychedelic experience, and I was sharing with them that you really have to be ready to let go of the way you see the world, because you will gain a new perspective. But once you do, you won't be able to see things the way that you did ever again.
Yes.
And so there's an incredible loss when you become more conscious about anything. You can't go back to the way that you saw it. And I think there's a real grief process there.
Yes.
As silly as it might sound,
no, it
there's
doesn't
something
sound
you
silly.
gain and there's something you lose.
Yes.
I mean, it makes sense, I think, when you're thinking about, a major life event like having a psychedelic experience. But even on a smaller scale, asking a question to a partner, to a family member, I mean, you might not like the answer.
Exactly.
And then you have to kind of deal with integrating that within your own system. There's just a lot. I'm sensing that this could bring up a lot that then you need to work on within yourself.
I think that's what's going to happen the end of the week, is all the information that is being exchanged is going to, like you say, it sprouts up from the unconscious to the conscious, and now you're aware of it, and it's like, I didn't want to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Now I see the world from a whole different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But that is where growth occurs. You can't stay a child your whole life. And collectively, we have to continue to evolve. Mankind has to continue to evolve. And in order for that to happen, we collectively and individually need to become more aware of things, stuff that we are unconscious of needs to be conscious.
Mm-hmm. And it comes at a cost.
Yes.
There's something you gain, there's something you lose.
And so that's going to take us to this final piece for the week. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Because Mars, the god of war, the planet of action, aggression, and conflict, transits into Taurus, the fixed earth sign symbolized by the bull, on Saturday, June 8th, which means on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, as Venus and the Sun in Gemini are squaring Saturn in Pisces, squeezing our unconscious to the conscious like popping a zit. Mars, the god of war, is going to be at the final degrees of Aries. That's intense.
Mm-hmm.
Just to give you an example of the intensity of Mars at these final degrees is, this was January 6th, 2021, the famous J6, the storming of the Capitol. That happened when Mars was at 29 degrees in Aries. Now, I don't know what happened last time that was so significant because that was August 20th of 2022, but it can bring a lot of tension here when Mars is exiting Aries, the sign that it rules. It is like popping that zit, and it can be painful. It's going from the fire sign to the fixed earth sign of the bull. So it's almost like the god of war is crashing into the sand dune, the dirt field. It's like all of a sudden we're stuck.
There's some sort of impact.
Yes, there's some sort of impact. But it's really encouraging us to be authentic about what we value.
And I'm hearing too, there's some sort of a release.
I think the release is about being authentic about what you value. We've had this week of really listening and learning and understanding and exchanging information from others. It's going to bring about a clarity in terms of, okay, I've heard from all these different people, their points of views. Now I'm even more clear about what I value. Maybe it changed in some way, but there will hopefully be clarity in terms of you being able to act from that place of knowing what you value and what your personal value is as well. This Taurus energy creates a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And Mars is transiting through Taurus from June 8th to July 20th. It's during this period that you want to take action to secure what you value. You're authentic about what you value. You know what you value, so you know what you need to do to secure what you value. That this is mine, that's yours. Here's the line. Don't cross it.
Mm-hmm.
The last time Mars was transiting through Taurus was July 4th to August 20th, 2022. And the time before that was January 6th to March 3rd, 2021. So think back to those dates for clues on what could be in store for you. This time around is Mars transits through Taurus. Those of you who were born with key astrological points or planets in Leo or Aquarius, lean into the conflicts that are coming towards you. Lean into the conflicts. The conflicts are there to challenge you in terms of your self-worth and your values. Like, you really value something when somebody tries to take it from you and you say no.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Those are the conflicts that could be coming up, where somebody's going to try to take something from you and you're going to have to say no. No. Like a child. No, that's mine. So there's some of that coming up here.
Mm-hmm.
What are you willing to fight for to protect?
Well, in Taurus, too, it's about what's mine and what's yours.
Mm-hmm.
It is about that difference.
Yes.
The boundaries.
Yes, exactly. So the boundaries are getting drawn right now during this period. And that's why the conversations are so good, because the conversations are also going to help you learn about the people around you and what they value, so that you can understand, does this person reflect my values? If they don't reflect my values, do they respect my values? And if they don't respect my values, then I definitely need to draw a line between me and them. We need to be separated because they don't value what I value. We have a different set of values. And so you stay over there and I'll be over here, and let's not engage with each other.
But I like what you said, that even if you don't share the same values as someone, as long as you respect each other's values, then you can coexist.
That's the important key. You have to, if you don't reflect, then you have to respect. And if there's no respect, then that's when there needs to be a boundary.
Right.
Because respect should simply be the boundary. But sometimes if there's no respect, then there needs to be a firmer boundary so that there is respect. You need to respect that this line over here is mine, and that line over there is yours. I don't cross that. You don't cross this. And it's not necessarily like a physical line, but it's an energetic line. Like, don't speak to me that way. Don't act this way around me. Don't behave that way around me. I value somebody that behaves in this manner. And when you're in my home, you need to behave in that manner. If not, then you can't be in my home. Or I'm not going to invite you around these groups of people because of the way that you behave is not in accordance with my values and the people that I spend time with. So there's a lot of different ways to think about values. And
well, I'm thinking, for example, like if you're someone who doesn't wear shoes inside your house.
Right.
And someone comes over who maybe does wear shoes inside their house, they still need to respect when they're in your home.
That's a great example.
That you don't want them to wear shoes in your house.
Right.
That's maybe I don't know, that's an example from my own life.
It's a great example.
Yeah.
It's a great example.
Kind of how that might be showing up.
Yes.
It can be something really kind of small like that.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you. It's a big week.
Yes, indeed.
Our first question comes from Elisa. Hello. I am a Leo rising and Capricorn moon. My Sun, Mercury, and North Node are all in Libra. I'd like to hear how I could benefit from the North Node currently transiting through Aries. I work in the arts field. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Elisa, for your question. I think what the North Node transiting through Aries is how it's benefiting you is it's helping you learn to be more authentic. Now, there is the potential threat of you falling into that South Node energy of South Node in Aries, where you're maybe being more forceful or impulsive than you should be. But I think the way to work and harness the energy is to think of yourself as a diplomat. That's what the North Node in Libra is about. It's about being a diplomat. It's about being a negotiator. And just because you were born with the South Node in Aries doesn't mean you're meant to totally forget your sense of courage and your strong sense of self and authenticity. The North Node transiting through Aries is helping you remember who you are so that when you approach the negotiation, you can be authentic in terms of what it is you want from whomever you are in relationship with and what you are willing to give in return.
I think of this a little bit as like a freebie almost. Like for you, the North Node in Aries that's transiting collectively it's like that song on the radio you already know. So for you, it's just a kind of a reminder of something that you on a soul level already understand. So maybe it's just a refresher. It's just something just to sort of notice, like a familiarity with. And maybe you're noticing how others are learning that lesson that you already know. So there could be a sense of kind of camaraderie there, a sense of comfortability, but also a recognition that that's not what you're here to do. Like, oh, I already know this lesson. I think it's interesting to consider how we have these collective transits that in some ways are what we're working on, and in some ways they're not. So in some ways it's like we're following the current, we're following the river, and sometimes we're swimming against the current, depending on how our individual chart relates to what's happening collectively. So yes, it still affects us, but it's not necessarily our personal work.
Sure. You gave me kind of an idea though, because since you or Elisa knows this energy so well because it's her South Node, Aries, and the North Node's transiting through Aries, maybe part of what she can offer those in relationship is helping others recognize the value of being authentic, being courageous, being themselves. So part of what she can offer in relationship is encouragement to the other side to be who they are rather than trying to be something that they're not.
Right. So maybe maybe you find yourself being given opportunities to become a role model or kind of a teacher in this way in relationships.
Love that.
Where you're able to recognize in that other person that they don't have the same skill that you have.
Exactly.
And you can kind of model for them what that looks like or help communicate how much you value that quality and how helpful it's been for you. And there could be some really beautiful exchanges in that way in relationships that could help you with your North Node in Libra.
Right. Love that.
Our next question, we have 2 questions from Jessica King that we'll answer together.
Yes.
Jessica writes, with the Scorpio full moon coming in, I'm curious to know how it impacts other planets in Scorpio. I have a lot of Scorpio in my 2nd house, the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node. I'm a 9th house Gemini Sun and a Libra Rising. So that's Jessica's first question. And then she asks, I'm new to astrology and curious if this new moon feels so good because my North Node is in Taurus in the 8th house. I have 4 planets in Scorpio in the 2nd house.
Okay, well, Jessica, obviously, the full moon in Scorpio, the new moon in Taurus, which you're asking about, those have long since passed. So thank you for your question, and thank you for your patience in receiving our answer. I will encourage you to enroll in my moon cycle classes because that would be like the best place to answer these questions for you. To give some highlights here, you're feeling good with the new moon in Taurus. I mean, that could be because it's aligning with those planets in Scorpio. They are in opposition to one another. You're also a Gemini Sun, and I feel like during that new moon, there is a lot of planets transiting through Aries, which were potentially aligning with your sun in Gemini, which would feel good. They could have also been aligning with your Libra rising, which would feel good. In terms of the full moon in Scorpio and the way that it impacted your planets in Scorpio, wherever the moon goes, I think of the moon as like salt to a wound. It's like you might be feeling something there, but then you put that salt on it. And it's like, oh, wow, I really feel it. And it doesn't necessarily feel bad, but the moon brings that emotional sensitivity to wherever it goes. So the full moon in Scorpio was bringing that emotional sensitivity to your sense of expansion and jovialness, which is Jupiter, your sense of restriction and responsibility, which is Saturn, your sense of transformation and will, which is Pluto, and then your emotions as well, which is the moon. It was probably coming into contact with all of those in some way, shape, or form, depending on their degrees, and just sort of highlighting the energy that already exists within you and really tapping into what that feels to you on an emotional level.
I think this is an example actually of what we were talking about in the last question, where instead of going against the current, you're going with the current of collectively what's happening collectively is aligning energetically with your own chart. And so there's an experience of harmony.
Potentially, yes. But it is also interesting because she's a Gemini sun and a Scorpio moon. And there is sort of this dichotomy between those two signs, because I think of Gemini as the lightest sign, and I think of Scorpio as the deepest, darkest, most passionate sign. So there is this, I don't want to say necessarily tension, but just this, there's a real difference to Jessica's emotional nature and how she identifies. And that emotional nature was probably coming up a lot with the full moon in Scorpio, which might have been a lot for her Gemini battery.
Yes, and it could also maybe feel good because when you have the moon in Scorpio, there can be a tendency to hide your emotional nature. And so it could feel good to have that sort of released and to see that reflected in the outer world, to realize that maybe it doesn't have to be as hidden as it was. So I could see it going both ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let us know, Jessica. How was it for you? We'll look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for the question. All right. And that'll do it for the week. So thank you again to all of our listeners. Thank you, Gabriella. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit. If you're curious to learn how these transits or any others may be affecting you, or if you are interested in learning more about your astrological code, contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. If you're interested in delving into the world of psychotherapy with Gabriella, you can connect with her at innervisionpsychotherapy.com. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog-Lyman. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.